football, looking at fall camps across the country. Of course, this is the place to be for coverage of the game we all love right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Also want to let you know that we have a special offer available right now in conjunction with Bet Now. Grab the link that you see in the description section below. This also helps funding for Volunteer Roadshow Bobby's son, who has cancer. And so it's a joint effort with a number of YouTubers, St. Jude's Hospital and Bet Now. So grab that link. And if you use the promo code, Mark Rogers TV College Football, MRTV CFB, you get 50% added to your account balance to get you set for the 2019 season. And we'll have more explanation on that later. Let's talk some Florida football. We got David Waters on the line from Gators Breakdown. And Florida fans, of course, I want you to be here. I want you to subscribe to get the full aspect of SEC football in the nation. But if you love Florida football and you don't know about Gators Breakdown, my goodness, get over there as soon as possible because they do it like nobody else. David, we appreciate you stopping by.
No problem, Mark. I'm glad to be on here. And hey, a week earlier than everybody else, Florida and Miami kicking camp off for this week 0 game. And last Friday and Saturday, the Gators hitting camp hard, getting ready for that week 0 game.
Absolutely. So it's all speeded up for us in regards to cutting down the summer. But I love it in that I'm always scrambling all over the place, as I'm sure you are, and trying to figure out, oh, man, I want to watch 5 games at the same time. Well, this at least takes one of them and boom, makes it all by itself where I can just focus on the one game. Unless, of course, Arizona and Hawaii get in. I'm just kidding. Florida and Miami, the one game that most of us care about in week 0. So Florida's got to get ready real quick for a defense that's rather good. The wild card is that Miami offense, but focusing on Florida for the next 4 weeks, you've been to practice the first 2 days. Your thoughts about what you really need to hear reported out of camp, what you need to see that's going to make you feel better about the team. What are the storylines?
Yeah, first of all, Mark, it's what the team looks like. And that's this is the first time you really get to see them as a team. Guys, I thought it was really important for the guys who needed to gain some weight that they gained some weight. They look cut. Or the guys who needed to shed some weight, they shed some weight. They've lost some weight. They look good and maybe can be more mobile now. And no more important than that is that along the offensive line, the starting 5 there is pretty much the same what it was when we left spring practice. Stone Forsythe at left tackle, Brett Heggie at left guard, Nick Buchanan at center, Chris Blake at right guard, and Genie Lance at right tackle. But Florida got some good news last week as we were talking to Dan Mullen at Gators Media Day last week as well, that Noah Banks, who will be a key reserve, a senior, he had an epileptic event in going through bowl prep last year with Michigan. We weren't sure. He didn't go through spring as well with that condition. We weren't sure if he'd be able to be counted on at any time point in this season. And he was out there practicing day 1. You got to see him at right guard and filling in a little bit. He'll be needed. I have full confidence in offensive line coach John Hevesy and what he can do in finding a starting 5, 6, 7 guys there for a couple of reserves. But playing in the SEC, Mark, the offensive line, Florida was very fortunate last year to be kind of injury free for the most part along the offensive line. They're if they can replicate that again, great, but you can't count on that. So Florida's got to go find 2, 3, 4 key reserves, so true freshmen aren't out there getting their grind on with facing the defensive lines of Georgia and LSU and Miami week 1 or week 0, if you want to call it that. There, so I like what I saw in the physique and the way those guys looked, and that was the offensive line is the biggest question. So that's why I started there first. But all in all, you like what you saw from Felipe Franks, Emory Jones, the 2 quarterbacks there, and their accuracy. Not a lot of 7-on-7 or 11-on-11 work that we got to see. But for the most part, I was really surprised with the way Emory Jones may have improved from last season to this season.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down the Gators. And the best way to do that is get yourself over to Gators Breakdown for Florida football coverage on a regular basis, just day after day, multiple podcasts throughout the week with David Waters and the rest of the staff there. They do Florida football like nobody. So lock it in here, but definitely go over to Gators Breakdown as well. David, for those people that either check on the other sports, NBA, baseball, whatever, they tune out after the national championship game, then they come back 8 or 9 months later, but don't keep up with it. What's different about this Florida team can you anticipate versus what we saw last year? People are expecting that trajectory to continue. Dan Mullen certainly set himself up in a good way, but in terms of expectations, I know that Florida fans and just the national perspective is, okay, it's a showdown with Georgia now. They're ready to go. They're ready to compete toe to toe. So your thoughts along those lines?
I'll go to Lamichael Piron, the starting running back for the Gators, and what he was able to do last year toward the end of last year. And I had always kind of labeled him a good all-around back, but maybe lacked the home run threat. And we saw that versus FSU last year. We saw that versus Michigan last year, and in bowl prep as well. They found that they could use him as a receiver. He split out wide, catching tunnel screens, and as a weapon against a pretty good Michigan defense. Yes, missing a couple players that sat out bowl game, but still overall a pretty good defense. And not one Florida probably should still put 40 points on the board, but they did. So him being Lamichael Piron becoming that workhorse running back, and I kind of nailed him down and Dan Mullen down back at SEC Media Days a couple weeks ago. As would it look different this year for Lamichael Piron? He basically split carries, split stats, almost identical stats with Jordan Scarlett last year. But will he be that bell cow? Will he be that workhorse? And Dan Mullen, necessarily, it's his history not to really have a bell cow type of running back. But I don't necessarily know if he's had a running back like Lamichael Piron and the versatility that he brings. And it's not to shun on Damian Pierce or Malik Davis, who I've been high on. I talked about Malik Davis last couple of years pretty highly. You just got to stay healthy. But I just think what Lamichael Piron can do, his versatility, his skill set. I think Florida's going to have a true number one running back with Lamichael Piron. So I think that would be one of the bigger differences of the offense this year is him becoming a workhorse, because Florida's going to spread the ball out at wide receiver. Felipe Franks is going to take a step. How big of a step? That's another question, but everybody knows about that question. Mine is how much more of a factor, and I predict a pretty big factor that Lamichael Piron will become.
David Waters, Gators Breakdown. Please join him and the rest of the staff right there on YouTube, all the audio platforms for the best in Florida football coverage. Big topic during the offseason, and then it spilled into SEC football media days, was where the game should be played against Georgia. Where does that stem from? Does it matter? Do you care? I certainly have been asked about it, but I'm like, I'm not a fan of either team. I don't care where they play. It seems pretty fair. They play the neutral site, and this is where it's always been. And I'm a college football traditionalist. Keep it there. But your thoughts about where this game should be played?
Mark, I was born in Jacksonville. I was raised around Jacksonville. I live in Jacksonville. The game should stay in Jacksonville. There's no ifs, ands, buts about it. The game should stay in Jacksonville. A lot of it stems from Kirby Smart, and rightfully so. He's looking out for his program. He's looking out for the best for Georgia, and he's not too keen on missing a recruiting weekend. Once every other year that Georgia would be the home team, if the game was a home and home. So he's not too keen on the idea of losing a recruiting weekend, a big time recruiting weekend. But I don't want to hear that excuse when you play Tennessee at home every other year, and what is usually a pretty good atmosphere as well. You play Auburn at home every other year, which is a pretty good atmosphere as well. You can make that recruiting weekend up somewhere along the way. More, if you're trying to compare it to losing a weekend because you have to go to Jacksonville. And there's a fan debate out there too that Georgia has to travel more and it's a longer distance. Well, look, there's a bye week. Both teams most of the time have a bye week before this game. So travel, pretty much a non-issue as well. Georgia hops on a plane. Florida hops on a bus. It's about the same amount of travel for both teams there. So, no, I don't want the game moved. It's to stay in Jacksonville. There are some traditions we're getting away from in college football. This shouldn't be one of them. We don't hear this about Texas and Oklahoma. Now, Texas and Oklahoma is another big neutral site rivalry. There's hardly ever talk of moving that game out of Dallas. I don't hear Oklahoma complaining. I don't hear Dallas or Texas complain about the game being in Dallas. So, and don't get me wrong. I don't want to. Dan Mullen hasn't necessarily been so forthcoming that saying that he wants the game in Jacksonville either. He likes the traditional aspect of it, but I also think that he kind of sees what Kirby Smart is talking about as well, and having a recruiting weekend. Mark, I say the game should stay in Jacksonville. It should never leave Jacksonville. The only thing I'd ever accept if they've already decided they're going to take the game out of Jacksonville, the only thing I'll accept and be halfway happy about is if it goes on some rotation like Gainesville, Jacksonville, Athens, Jacksonville. Keep Jacksonville in the rotation somehow, some way. But the game should never leave Jacksonville in a full capacity.
David Waters, Gators Breakdown, talking Florida football. And lastly, David, you mentioned some of the big highlights on the schedule. Georgia always, Tennessee, even if they're down, it's just a big game. Your look at the schedule versus what we saw last year. So off the top of my head, there's a Miami there that wasn't there last year. You always have Florida State, which is usually Titanic, but of course they were so down last year. They almost have to be better. The SEC schedule is similar in that you always have LSU on the other side. Last year you had Mississippi State. Now you've got a pretty comparable Auburn game, but it's at home. Your thoughts about the schedule?
The bookend with the two in-state rivals. You start with Miami, end with FSU, but Mark, it's that key stretch in the middle of the season where it's Auburn, LSU, South Carolina, bye week, Georgia. That's that 4-game stretch right there. That's going to define Florida season. You come out of that with one loss, you can set yourself up for a college football playoff run. You come out there with 2 losses, you probably need some help, but a pretty good resume if you go 10-2 with that schedule. But Florida's got to get past that Missouri team. Missouri's always, since they've been coming to the league in 2012, has given Florida a bit of problems. That series has been pretty even since Missouri's coming in. Florida's got to travel there late November, so it could be one of those cold noon kickoffs where Florida's not really amped up to go play there. But the way you got your brains beat in by Missouri last year after kind of a hard-fought game against Georgia, there should be some incentive to go and kind of maybe make a statement in Columbia, Missouri there. So, and also you can't forget about Kentucky early on in the season. Kentucky ended the streak last year, so Florida's got to work their way back getting a win and trying to start another streak against Kentucky there. So get Auburn as I mentioned out of the West there. Probably, definitely they came out one of the top 4 teams in the SEC West, pegged by the media there, and that's going to be homecoming for Florida. So, it's a loaded schedule for Florida this year. They got the 2 cupcake games there, but you pair the cupcake games with what they have in the SEC and at a conference there with Miami and FSU, and it's a pretty tough schedule for the Gators.
Florida fans, it goes without saying, I can't imagine that you're not locked into Gators Breakdown. But if you love the SEC and you're following college football and you want to grind down to the big programs and get below the surface and really understand where the program's headed and what's going on week to week, then you got to check out Gators Breakdown with David Waters. David, appreciate you stopping by, getting us updated.
Thanks, Mark.
Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's about all there is to it. Yeah, you should check this out.
Yeah, I